So I kind of want to start alternating. Is what you told yourself when after 40 hours of gameplay you had troubles with single tapping 220 BPM jumps on maps that you were clearly not supposed to be playing yet. And the first thing you did was go on Ozgame and make a thread about it. There, people started saying things like, alternating halves the BPM, and other stuff that are obviously jokes, although you had a slight suspicion that they might be serious. Regardless, you haven't gotten an answer to your question whether to start alternating, and if yes, how to go about it. Well, look no further, because in this video we will be answering those questions, giving you a basic guide that will help you on your way of becoming the alternator of your dreams. If you actually decide to stick with it, of course. So you might be asking, are there any high-ranked alternating players or really just anyone that you could watch on Twitch to see this fascinating playstyle in action? Well, the list of notable alternators include Azer. First, let's go through the reasons when alternating is actually a viable playstyle. When you have a medical problem that makes single tapping higher BPM difficult, alternating is pretty much the most sensible thing you can do. Apart from not playing, obviously. It takes off some stress from your wrists and fingers, although you have to be careful since you are still straining your joints during alternating, just to a lesser degree. If you are forced to alternate due to a medical condition, you might not be nearly as good as you were as a single tapper. But a slight nerf to your skill for the longevity of your hands is probably a fair trade-off. You will be using them hands for life. Don't mess it up for some mediocre PP maps. And besides, being able to play for years means you will get further in the game, even if it means you will need a little bit of more time to achieve your goals. Another case where alternating might be viable is when you just don't have the raw talent for developing fast single tapping fingers. Usually it's rare that the problem is actually in your genetics, as most people who start alternating for this reason just don't put enough work into training it in the first place. They just think having to put effort into developing your single tapping speed means they are just hopeless at it, which is probably not the case with their 60 hours of total gameplay. They usually end up abandoning alternating as well, since that takes even more dedication to learn, and will just stick to low BPM maps those don't require fast single tapping at all, then complain about all the evil DT farmers. Even though they are doing the exact same thing, but without the speed. Third and final reason why alternating may be viable is when you know you will spend a significant amount of time playing Ghosts, and based on what kind of maps you prefer, the long-term benefits of alternating would outweigh the sheer amount of work you will have to put in mastering it. Let's be real, most of you will never even hit this 300 hours mark, as you will quit before that could happen. For alternating to be truly worth it, you will need to spend tons of time just to be comfortable with playing the most basic stuff. More advanced things to alternate include any even-numbered pattern, consecutive triplets, and basically anything rhythmically challenging. Most alternators won't even alternate this stuff. They will just start the patterns with their dominant fingers. The more dedicated you are with alternating, the more you are trading the difficulty of physical strain for reading difficulty. More precisely, the reading difficulty increase comes from the higher complexity of accurately processing and translating the visual cues into alternating movements within a very short amount of time. This trade-off comes with a lot of things needing a lot more time to master if you are alternating. So some players are just better off sticking to single tapping. By the time these players mastered alternating, they could have just trained to single tap faster. As you can see, alternating is not for everyone. But why is that, when logically it sounds like a superior playstyle? You see, contrary to popular belief, there are several downsides to alternating, which makes it a relatively unpopular playstyle. One of these downsides is the work you have to put in to actually learn it. You have to invest a lot of time initially to be able to alternate, which discourages 95% of the players those are interested in learning it. The remaining 5% might not become full OCD perfect alternators either, and they will adjust to what extent they want to use alternating as a playstyle. So then the question arises, What are the extents of alternating you can choose from? Well, basically on the far left side we have the Pantheon-headed art that everything has to be single-tapped playstyle. And on the far right side we have the special snowflake OCD autism the same finger shall not touch upon this keyboard consecutively twice playstyle. Usually these extremes are reserved for people with mental problems, so pretty much 99% of the player base. But anyway, the third on the left is pretty much how normal people play. You may refer to them as normies, but let's be real, only normies use the word normies in current year. These players single tap jumps and alternate streams, though that's a different kind of alternating. Alternating single taps still moves your wrists like normal single tapping, but with less strain. Heck, some players move their wrists even when they stream. The average player also alternates alternate maps, which are very popular nowadays among the new players for some reason. Next we have the players those sometimes alternate the jumps when the BPM is too high. You cannot really call these players alternators yet. They pretty much just take the most useful things out of alternating, while keeping their single tapping playstyle. This type of alternating sounds great and the most logical, but a strategically placed triplet during a 255 BPM single tap section could absolutely ruin these players' day. The upside to the high BPM jump alternating is that these players don't really need to learn the most difficult parts of alternating. But in exchange, they can only alternate limited types of patterns, like straight up single taps, those would otherwise be too fast for them. Another downside might be that since you only alternate high BPM jumps, and nothing else, you may mess up under stress, and since you didn't invest in training single tap speed, you cannot do that either. But players those pick up the basics of alternating easily, yet don't want to invest too much time into it. For them, this type of alternating is probably the most suitable. The next type of alternating is actually when you can call yourself an alternator. However, this type of alternating is kind of incomplete. Fake alt players usually alternate most things, but they often start streaming and the other patterns with their dominant fingers. Probably one of the hardest things to learn when you are alternating is to forget which one is your dominant finger. These fake alt players would start every single triplet with their dominant fingers, even if there are like 8 270 BPM consecutive triplets right next to each other, greatly reducing their stamina and speed. However, unless we are talking about very high BPM consecutive bursts, these alternators have no real problems. They benefit from the increased single tap speed and stamina, and they don't have to learn the hardest parts of alternating, namely alternating very high BPM bursts and uneven patterns. But as a result, they also don't benefit from the greatest reward of alternating, which is going above their physical speed limit. If you start every single burst with the same finger, you will be doing consecutive triplets the same way as a single tapper would. By perfectly alternating consecutive triplets, you basically unlock limitless stamina, but that puts a hefty toll on your reading and finger control. And speaking of perfectly alternating, we finally reach our last sensible alternating style, which is the full alt. The full alt is what every true alternator should be striving for. Going for any less is basically admitting you are not dedicated enough to perfect your alternating. This type of alternating takes hundreds, even thousands of hours to master, but oh boy, once you do, your finger control and reading skills are the limit. Your physical limits will be much less of an issue, and your top plays will include some scores that would not have been possible on your level without mastering the techniques of full alt. But this type of alternating comes at a cost. Sometimes you will have to spend days, maybe even weeks focusing on alternating some patterns. You will be practicing alternating at home, on the bus, in school, during dinner, whenever your left hand is not occupied with anything. Wink. The only thing that sets apart the Pantheon-headed alternating is that full alt players won't be distracted when they accidentally press the same button twice. Sometimes the numbers on the keys are not exactly the same, but rational full alternators won't watch back their replays to see when they messed up, maybe even edit out the segment to practice. They would only do that if alternating specific types of patterns are very important to their alternating playstyle, like consecutive triplets. These are the 7 main types of alternators. Since alternating is more of a skill than rigid levels, some players might be between some types we have mentioned. Obviously, only you can decide and adjust to what extent do you want to alternate in OS. You don't have to be too strict with yourself if you alternate more or less than what you wanted to. Now you have a wide variety of alternating styles you can choose from, but you might want some practical tips on how to actually train it. Well, the short answer would be obviously play more. But there are some minor and not so minor things you can do to speed up the learning process. The most important thing is to focus on developing your alternating muscle memory to the point where you will alternate everything by instinct. To be honest with you, I cannot really single tap standard anymore. It just feels wrong. Anyhow, when you are starting to alternate, you want to do it on maps that are not too complicated. No point in trying to alternate maps that you cannot even play in the first place. The rhythm complexity of the map should be low as well, so no crazy 1/3 patterns and doublets for now. If you have chosen the full alt route, you might want to warm up by opening a txt file and just hitting triplets, starting each with a different finger. You should start out slowly and build up speed when you feel comfortable. If you mess up, you will notice that while looking at the string of letters in the txt file. You can use this technique on any kind of patterns. You can even come up with different patterns to try and execute this way. Obviously, this training method is more suited for those who are starting out, but if you encounter a certain pattern that you just cannot hit for the love of God, then coming back to the basics might be a good idea. If you are training with regular maps, and you are sick of these 3-star hard difficulties, you can play harder maps you can reasonably FC on lower BPM. The lower the BPM is the better, especially if you were a single tapper before, since on higher BPM you might instinctively hit the same key twice, or just completely freeze without being able to signal the movement to your fingers. Synchronizing your aim with your alternating could also be a problem, especially if you were a single tapper before. But that can also be trained by lower BPM and simpler maps. For tools that help you alternate, MacOS has a mod that forces you to full alt. Trying to FC maps with the mod may give you a tangible reward for training, which I'm sure you love judging by how obsessed you are with PP. And obviously, it will tell you when you messed up your alternating. So to sum it up, what are the pros and cons of alternating? Well, the core advantage is the increased skill potential, as the biggest factor that limits you in alternating is reading, and not your physical limits, which are much harder and more dangerous to overcome. All the other pros are based off of that, so faster single tap pattern execution, potentially more overall stamina, less risk to injuries. It can also be more fun, especially if you are a hipster like myself. The cons are based on the trade-off that comes with the increase in reading difficulty. So for example, it takes more time to master, a lot more time. Higher unstable rate thus lower accuracy, especially the closer you get to SS. Instead of shit misses, you will have misses due to messing up alternating. It's not for everyone, because some players might be genetically slower at learning alternating, and some players might be genetically better at single tapping. And it can be less fun, since sometimes you have to train your alternating specifically without immediate results. All in all, OS is a game, and if you feel like giving alternating a go, don't let anyone hold you back. If you decide after a while that it's not your cup of tea, you can switch back to single tapping at any time. Or you can just incorporate alternating in certain situations, like jumps above 240 BPM. I hope this video helped some of you on your alternating journeys, and if not, I hope it was informative, or at least entertaining enough. So are you an alternator? To what extent are you alternating? Let me know down in the comments. I'm sure you do.